You said that you disagree with the women only dating up comment.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, I don't think women only date up. I think it's plain and simple.
Well, hypergamy is just the rule in general. Like if you, I don't recall the exact number, but women, for example, overwhelmingly, I think it's like 93% of women date men who earn more than them.
Yeah, but you are generalizing. I just don't think it's true, though.
You don't think
but
it's true? Hypergamy is the rule.
It's a general statement, right? So when we're talking about hypergamy, you're not saying all. Nothing exists inside of a monolith. There's always going to be exceptions to every rule. It's the exception that proves the rule in this case. So, like if I were to ask you, if all things were equal, let's assume for a second you had two perfect clones. One man, you like the personality, in other words, and it was perfect clone, but one of the clones had millions of dollars and lots of really nice shit, and the other one didn't. Wouldn't you pick the one that had the really nice shit and the $1 million?
But then that goes on another level of like what mental they're at. Like, are they also like not go-getters?
All things are equal. They're the exact same. The only distinction
then how
is that one has a lot more shit than the other.
Max donated $100. Body count doesn't necessarily matter overall. Women just need to understand that if you sacrifice your own body, you don't qualify for a higher caliber man. High status, tall, handsome, leader.
Tall is crazy. That's
Tall is crazy.
Oh, there's short kings out there. That's rough.
Like that
How tall are you?
in Pretty Woman.
5'8".
Yeah.
5'8". Do you have a height preference at all?
No.
No? You date a guy shorter than you?
I did. My ex.
You did?
My one ex.
Okay, there you have it.
But
did you guys want to continue with your...
Yeah, if you don't mind. So I guess the point is just to say that if the option is available, if you have two men who are roughly equal in your eyes as far as personality and things like this go, they're both pursuing you, but one has an amount of resources which is far superior to the other, wouldn't you generally go with the one that has a lot more in the way of resources?
Of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's basically all the descriptor of hypergamy is that men don't differ particularly too much between man to man other than perhaps in looks, height differentials, things like this. But if you have them and they're close enough and one has a lot more resources than another, generally speaking, women seem to go for the one that has more resources. That's the point.
I don't know. It's because you said men are generally like similar, right? That's kind of a crazy statement.
Why?
Because that's not true. Like, depending on where you are in life, and it's just your surroundings and who you meet. Like, I'm not going and seeking these really wealthy men or looking for these wealthy men. It's just who's around me, right? So like, if it's
we're not saying that you are, though. The point isn't to say that you're actively seeking or gold digging. There's plenty of women who don't actively seek and gold dig. The point is just to show that if the options are available, even if a man could maybe perhaps be, slightly better on the personality, but just slightly less better looking and have more money than the alternative, we're just saying that the chances that the woman will go for the alternative becomes much higher. Well, then, doesn't that stand to reason?
Well, there's vice versa. If it's the same woman, the same thing with a man. Like a man would...
It doesn't seem to necessarily be the same case for men. So men seem to not seek women out specifically for resources or vice versa. Whereas vice versa, that does seem to be the case, is what I mean.
Well, at least let's pretend that it's old money. Let's say, like, I know there's a lot of problems with certain like men where they're like, oh, I don't want a working woman. Let's pretend it's old money and she inherited that. And it's two of the exact same, and one has tons of money and the other doesn't. You would also date the woman with tons of money?
You mean if all things were equal,
all
they were
things
the
are
exact
equal,
same woman?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. And I think every man would say that that's true.
Yeah.
But the point here is the reason we start with all things equal is just to break down, okay, you and I are in agreement that if there's resources which are added, it does add value, right? The distinction here for hypergamy is just to say that women seem to seek that value out a lot more than men do. That's the point. Just generally. It's not always the case, but it's just generally the case.
But do you
we start even. I agree with you. For men and women, that would matter to a degree. I just think it matters a lot more to women. And this is what we see in the data and the trends.
But do you think that that's trending downwards as like newer generations?
No, it seems not to be trending downwards. As materialism trends upwards, it seems that we have more of this problem, not less of this problem. So, I mean, absent materialism, if men have lots of resources and you can net a man who has lots of resources, wouldn't that be your preference? Whereas for men, if you ask them that question, they say, some say yes, but most say not really. It's not really the thing that they're after is resources. Mostly after things like beauty, the ability to become a good mother, things like this. They're not really after your resources.
So you're saying Gen Z, Gen Alpha are answering that?
Answering what?
Saying that they are still seeking out women who are good mothers and beautiful. That's still Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
Yeah, well, Gen Z is actually trends more conservative in the smaller percentile. So yeah, they do tend to answer that way. Interestingly enough, as millennials get older and their priorities change, it's the same thing. Men seem to answer that way then as well.
May I add something? So I agree with the initial statement that women typically look for men that kind of resources. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think where you're coming from is that, like, if you were to typically ask any woman in this generation, they're not going to say that outright. Yeah. Plus, in the dating world, there's not really typically a lot of suitors that bring that to the table as far as resources go.
Yeah, that's why we have such a lopsided issue, which is that as women are able to make more and more and more money, especially in resident fields like the medical field, things like this, men as the provider of resources, this has actually taken the market and flipped it on its head. So now there's actually a lot less men who are desirable from the biological trend of women. So they're still looking for men who make higher resources, but right now, women make a lot in the way of the marketplace when it comes to money, home ownership. There's actually more homeowners who are single, and there will be more homeowners who are married in just 10 years who are women. So over men, which is crazy. So all that hypergamy is looking at is saying, listen, one of the big problems in the dating market is as women's resources drastically increase, you start to see that the lopsided way that they pick men has moved to a smaller and smaller percentage. That's the point.
So wouldn't that kind of contradict itself? That women, since it flipped its side on its head, now that...
Grid 1 Motorsports donated $100. Seems simple. Men will not leave hot poor women to date ugly rich women. Women will leave an attractive poor man to date ugly rich men 100%. Brian, next time you need a remote in, put me in, coach.
Hey, Grid 1, good to see you in the chat, man. Thank you for your TTS. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, Grid 1 is awesome. Anyway, what's the contradiction you see?
So that women, like that you just said, the market kind of flipped itself on its head. So women are, creating their own resources. So now, wouldn't that mean that women are not seeking men for resources anymore?
No, they still, what's interesting about this trend is it makes my point, not yours, which is that as the market flips itself on the head and women are able to increase their resources, they seem to be vying for a smaller pool of men who have more resources than they have, whereas men are not following that trend.
Agreed. I think women just naturally want the best, so they're just going to select the best dating options. Even if they are making a lot of money, they're still going to want men who make more money than them, so no matter what, they're just gonna select the man who has the most resources.
Add something to that too. I feel like a major trend too is you have a lot of I would say more of like a subpart, especially on social media, Instagram, TikTok, those types of things, where you have really strong women and they'll talk a lot of game about, I want a partner to match my lifestyle. And so you'll see a lot of the women that are, part of that top percentile of, wealthy women or educated women, whatever you would like to put it as, kind of living that life with those types of men versus like, okay, well, I found this guy in my little hometown, even though I'm super wealthy and he's just a good guy, but I'm going to give it a chance, even though I'm kind of picking him up. I feel like you see the offset side of that more often than not.
Right, they're not dating down is what you're saying.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Not dating down. That's the whole point, and that's kind of the push for what is talked about when we're talking about hypergamy, saying women aren't dating down. The trends don't show that they're dating down. One of the big reasons that they say that they get divorced is because they no longer feel equally yoked. They don't date down, generally.
And
it's not always the case, right? You're right. Nothing exists in a monolith. You can always point to exceptions, but the exceptions are what make that rule true.
The statistics on divorce is like 73% of divorces are initiated because of cheating.
What?
Yeah,
No,
it's a huge percentage.
That's incorrect. It's due to irreconcilable differences. Cheating is number 3 on the list.
Well, that is one of the differences.
I don't understand
Like
what your point is.
Yeah, how is cheating involved?
They don't want to put it on paper.
Because, I mean, the original thing was you objected to this idea that women tend to date up.
Well, I was interjecting the point because the statistics were like over 70% or it's because of cheating. That's what it...
No.
Let's assume it is, though. Let's assume it is. How is it relevant at all?
Because of his initial point about what he just said about divorce.
But the original conversation was about women having a tendency to date up. Let's just
I see. I think I know what she's saying. Let me make sure I can get this, just be as maximum charitable as I can be. You're saying that you think that there's an alternative reason why divorces could be happening other than men and women being equally yoked. That's what you're saying.
That he brought up the point of divorce, so I read divorce statistics recently because of the show. It comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but just so you understand, even if it were true that, let's say, the number one reason that divorces were happening is because men cheat. That's not true, by the way. But even if it was, that still wouldn't change the fact that women tend to not date down, and that in the case of divorce, even if I were to yield that to you, all other trends would still show that women tend not to date down.
I think you made a good point about women getting more and more resources for themselves as they have more opportunities, and I think that's why newer generations would probably show eventually that there is more dating down, because like you said, if we're all in a pool that keeps trying to date up, like, I'm just confused how that would work as a society.
Well, let me
all
explain
just keep
how it
going up
works,
and up and
so
up.
that you know. Hang on, I can explain this to you so that you know. This is the big problem. This is why what is called the red pill exists, is because of this central keynote problem that you put in front of us right now, which is what happens when there's only a small amount of men who have enough resources to basically be above women in this respect. Well, what happens is all of the women start competing for that small amount of men. And if they can't get one by about age 30 or 34, they tend to settle down at that point. And if they settle down at that point, they can't have nearly as many children, and generally speaking, they have lived a promiscuous lifestyle. Not always, I'm just saying, again, we're talking in generalities, and that's what happens. That's why you have such a cultural societal trend that is so messed up right now. The actual existence of what is considered the red pill on the dating market is exactly a response to this question that you currently asked.
Can I, kind of to piggyback on that too, I feel like there was a segment on an episode a while ago where the conversation kind of came up where it was about girls dating the hot guy or getting with him or fucking him or whatever, and he doesn't really have to do anything, but the nice guy comes along and say he's just kind of average, whatever, she'll settle, I guess you could say, because that...
Jayakin donated $100. With women dating up, here's an example. 50 Shades of Grey is only romantic because the guy's a billionaire. Yeah. If he was living in a trailer, it'd be a Criminal Minds episode.
Agreed.
Well put, Jay. Well put.
I mean, he's not lying. There was a movie years ago with Demi Moore called Indecent Proposal. Anybody ever seen Indecent Proposal?
No. Well, there's
inside
also,
of the movie, a rich billionaire approaches a married couple who wants to sleep with the wife, and so offers $1 million to sleep with the wife. What, of course, made the movie interesting is because, again, that was exploring this problem of will the woman trade up, and in the movie she did. In the movie she did trade up. So, yeah, there's a little bit of wisdom to that super chat, to be honest with you.
You had something really quick, and then I'm going to chime in. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was saying is it kind of relates to this almost because it's, you have a lot of girls who will get with a really, wealthy guy, hot guy, whatever. And obviously if she's not up to his certain type of standard, or maybe she's not yoked with him at that point, most of the time if she gets kind of kicked off or ghosted or whatever, there's always that chance she finds the guy who comes along who will pick her up just enough where she's not scraping by, and she'll settle. And I feel like that's kind of like, I would say her version of, well, I was dating up, I'm dating up, and then it's the settling point, which I would say would lead to more like divorce rates because they're not happy. They didn't essentially get what they wanted in the end. So that's kind of from what I've seen from personal experience of seeing those types of situations and the trends.
So wait, to bring it back, your position is essentially, broadly speaking, women are not really interested in dating up? Is that, like, can you restate your position?
It was more that I think that's just not true. Like, I don't think women
what's not true?
I don't think they date up. Because
in general?
I think newer generations.
Can I add?
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. The average age, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, for marriage is approximately 30.5 years old for women in general. Why do you think that is?
Wait, prioritize Discord.
I'm guessing you're going to say because they tried to date up and it didn't work out, right? That's your point?
Well, whether it is or it isn't, I'd like to hear why you think it is that women are getting married at 30 years old when clearly their fertility at that point is going to be drastically reduced in comparison to if they had gotten married when they were in their 20s. Why do you think they're waiting until they're in their 30s?
Well, trends are now showing that's because they're now trying to focus on careers.
Right. So they're trying to focus on resources, right?
Yes.
Okay, so they feel like it takes X amount of time for them to have some kind of resources and safety net and things like this that they can fall back on, and then they'll focus on getting married. Now, do you think that generally speaking, women are marrying men who make more money than them or less money than them?
Right now, probably more.
Probably more. So if you were to put all of this together, what would you say? What would be your synopsis for why this phenomenon is happening now and it's never happened before in history?
You're saying this has never happened before in history? That women dating up?
No. It's never happened before in history where women are waiting until they're in their 30s on average to get married.
Well, it's because they're getting more rights now, and they're able to.
Well, they've had rights. They've had rights, for 70 years. And even then, the trend still showed women were getting married when they were younger. Men, on average, get married when they're younger, too. So the question becomes really here, why is it that women are waiting till they're in their 30s to get married? Well, do you want to know what the responses from these surveys are for why they say that they're waiting until they're in their 30s to get married? What do you think that they are, if you had to guess?
Because they're waiting for the right person.
Well, they also say they're waiting to find somebody who's equally yoked with them and has financial stability. And when they get married, they're getting married to men generally who have more resources than they have. So that's not always the case, right? But they tend to settle when they're in their 30s. And in their 20s, they're looking for these, I don't know what you would call them, the Omega Chad or whatever the fuck you want to call it. They seem to be looking for that. And this is just what the data shows over and over again. So I would actually like to hear why you think what the alternative to this is in your mind. What is the alternative explanation?
To dating up? What's the alternative?
No, to why women are waiting until so late in life.
Yeah, it's because, like we were talking about, there's more possibilities for women. Like, we can go look at like Asian fertility rates and things like that. The birth rates going down as they are able to work more and more because they want to have a full career.
Right. So there's more options for them until they get into their 30s, and then the options begin to narrow. And so what do? What do they do when those options begin to narrow in their 30s?
If they settle, don't you think that's dating below them? If they're
settling can be, yeah, but even then, they tend to at least settle with somebody who makes on par the amount of money they make or more than they make. So again, you say that it's because the options, right? They have so many more options when they're younger. We totally agree. They have tons more options when they're younger. They're looking through all of those options, but when the options begin to narrow, that seems to be when they settle, right?
If I could jump in here too, why do you think women don't date up? You even just said that women settle for someone who makes equivalent or below.
My point about the settling was, in his mentality, not dating up is settling, right? So a lot of times if they can't date up.
What about your mentality?
Would not, if I'm dating someone who makes less than me?
If you're dating a broke guy, would you consider that settling?
No, not necessarily at all.
Okay, so do you think women in general, though, would...
Wait, tilt your mic down.
Do you think women in
There you go.
Do you think women in general, if they dated men who could not financially provide for them, would consider that settling, as opposed to the ideal of dating someone who financially could take care of them, which would be women dating upwards?
And that's why I think it's more of a generational debate. I think younger generations start thinking, no, it's not settling, but if we get into...
So you don't think modern women want to date men who can financially...
The average age of marriage is increasing. It's not decreasing.
Nick, boost the
audio.
audio.
It's like, I don't understand... I'm
lower
trying
the
to
audio?
figure out where it is that you're coming from here. Because I think I get the worldview. I think I understand. We start with the monolith. You dismiss the monolith. That's fair, right? We're talking in generalities here. But you yourself, aren't you on essentially the same path, right? You're going to wait until you're educated and you have, something to fall back on, possibly a good nest egg. You're out not in any rush. Is it inconceivable to you that you yourself will end up being one of these women who probably gets married later in life at 29, 30, 31?
No, I completely see myself getting married way later than...
Right, so you're following the exact same
Lower it
trend
a little bit.
that most of them are. You're exploring the options. Now, if Mr. Right comes in before then, and he's a football player with millions of dollars, and wants to marry you, that might change drastically your outlook,
A little
right?
more.
No, because it's not necessarily on him, it's on me. Am I prepared for that?
That's what I'm asking you. If Mr. Right came in tomorrow,
With millions of dollars? No,
he was
'cause-
Rico Suave, and he had millions of dollars swept you off your feet, wouldn't you drastically reevaluate your situation?
Not at all. Why would I depend on someone with millions of dollars? What if he leaves me? There's
And then what happens if he leaves you and he has millions of dollars and you're married to him? What happens?
Oh, there's definitely a prenup. Most people are somewhat smart about that, I would say.
A lot of these millionaires, surprisingly, don't get prenups. They don't get them. The women convince them not to get them, and they don't get them. So if a guy wasn't going to get a prenup with you, he had millions of dollars, he's Rico Suave, he sweeps you off your feet right this second, what the hell would you ever have to work again for or rely on anything for? Wouldn't you go for it, or would you still wait until your education was done?
I would 100% wait. I've dedicated so many years to my education. That would be such a loss.
Do you value different resources? Is that why you said no to, if you dated a broke guy, that wouldn't be dating down?
Yeah, value them as a human more than their resources. If they're just a good person.
Sure, but in do you plan on having kids?
Yeah.
So in your grand scheme of your life, do you, put finances at the bottom, even though finances do go into a lot of having kids, getting a house, having a comfy lifestyle?
Well, I've always planned on working, so it's not really a concern to me if they're the stay-at-home dad. That's never okay. That's not a concern for me at all.
That's why I asked. Oh.